sessions. Our first speaker is Professor Barry Smith. He's the SUNY Distinguished Professor in Philosophy and the ontology guru, and is always a fascinating speaker to listen to. So, Barry, you can take it away.
Good. So just a little bit of background. I published a book with a co-author called Why Machines Will Never Rule the World, which is a very much a study of the limits of large language models and other varieties of AI. And I will be talking about some of those limits today. So this was my original title, but then I noticed this talk on a much more interesting topic. So I changed my title. Could AI and data science reshape how we understand history and geography? Can we do geography or history better using ChatGPT? That is more or less the question. And so they released ChatGPT 5 very recently, and Sam Altman, who is the guru of the GPT algorithms, said that this had now reached PhD level in more or less all disciplines. And so the one question is, well, is this true for disciplines like history and geography? And then a related question, can we use AI to improve the teaching of history and geography? And my answer to all of these questions is no. So I'm going to focus on the French and Indian War, and specifically on the beginning in 1756. These are maps of the French and Indian War. I collected about 10 of them, but I could have collected many more maps. I could have collected many more military plans, many more documents pertaining to the number of deaths at given battles, and so forth. So there's a huge amount of data on the French and Indian War. I have no idea whether a significant fraction of this data was used to train ChatGPT. My suspicion is that it wouldn't make any difference, even if they had used a lot of these maps in some sense to train. Do you happen to know if they used maps, old maps?
I believe there were, at least documents that are like that.
Yeah. But if you try and test the ability of ChatGPT to produce maps, you will be shocked at how badly they perform. So, and this applies to all maps, not just maps about historical events, but maps, for instance, of the rate of investment in AI in different countries. You get a map, it will tell you that Iran is actually in Saudi Arabia. And South Africa is at the bottom of both the Latin American continent and also the Indian subcontinent. South Africa is not anywhere in Africa on this map. You can make maps like this without any effort, any question with a geographical connotation. ChatGPT will likely produce a map which is full of mistakes. So this is the map I chose as my hobby horse. So it's a map about that part of America which was the principal seat of war in 1756. And human beings can read this, so we can see that some of the typography is a little bit hard to follow. So the St. Lawrence River is spread across 3 squares, but we can read that. It doesn't cause us human beings any problems. So I tried this with Perplexity Claude GPT-5. Please use this map to create a simplified map suitable for teaching. One idea is that we apply this to many maps and we thereby can extract patterns about how the war developed, how cartography developed, how politics developed. And because ChatGPT is so clever and brilliant and so well trained, we should get all kinds of interesting information. This is Perplexity. So this is not very good. This is porridge. Atlantic Ogier. I mean, you can't read most of it. First Tivania is Pennsylvania. So Claude, this is much better, but it's complete nonsense. So the Great Lakes are on the western side of Quebec. Philadelphia is south of New Orleans. The Mississippi has nothing to do with New Orleans. So it's beautiful in some sense, but it shows that they don't understand very much. They don't understand what a map is, how to arrange text on a map, how to use color on a map, what a boundary is, what a coastline is. Can you work out where the coastline is here? What teaching is. I mean, this is not going to help anybody teach geography or history or anything. Maybe how not to draw maps. This is another one. Bits of mountains scattered around. Quebec at the end of a long line, and then another Quebec. No boundaries anywhere. So actually, there is one good thing about Claude. It doesn't make any spelling mistakes. So you can read all the words. That's really a great achievement. So, GPT-5, the same prompt. This is response number 1. I have hundreds of maps like this. So Massachusetts is not probably a correct spelling. And there are 2 New Hampshires. You can't tell where the water is. So this is Lake Nortov, or Nortu, and Pennsylvania both occupy the same area, which, given the clue regarding the Atlantic Ocean over there, should be water. But Pennsylvania is not. All right, and then there are incoherent longitude coordinates. So that is not the way to do longitude coordinates. All right, so my game in producing these hundreds of maps, and I have links which I can send to you if you're interested in the evidence, my game is to try and coax them in the direction of accuracy or usefulness. So I say, please make the title and year visible and draw the border between Canada and New France and the British colonies. So they sort of drew the border. New York suddenly appeared from nowhere. Pennsylvania is spelled correctly here, but they still have problems with Massachusetts. And they haven't got the title so that you can read it yet. So I keep working. Please make the title visible in its entirety and check the date, because we want this to be 1756. So they didn't. I mean, they made the title visible, all of it, but they still keep the wrong date. And Massachusetts is now spelled in yet another way. And Ontario Lake, Ontario L, seems to be on land. There's a lot of water above it, it seems. That's what we're aiming for, a map of that part of America, which was the principal seat of war. They have changed the focus. When I ask these questions, typically they just produce another map, which is typically not better than the previous map, but it will be different. But sometimes they give me long pages explaining all their errors and saying, on the next map, I will correct these errors. So this is an example of one of these pages. It noticed the Massachusetts spellings. Atlantic was truncated as Atlante or Atlantke. And the correct thing it says is Atlantic Ocean. Thank you very much. And it gives me this. The title has moved to a different place now. The color scheme has disappeared. And now we get funny letters, like the first map that I showed. So Fort Overvijde seems to be a problem. There are 2 Massachusetts, which actually is correct, but they're not in the right positions. And they were separated. Here they are not separated, and they're also not properly named. And they're British colonies at this stage, of course. New Hampshire, if that's what NEH means, is to the west of New York. There is a lake called Lake. One finds very often the lake named Lake. So what is Fort Overvijde, I say, and it says it should be Fort Oswego. For some reason, they have a fascination with Fort Oswego, but it's always at the fringe of the map so that you can't quite read it in full. And so, where is it now? It's here, it's disappeared again. There's something called Antne here. There's Lake, and there's another lake called Lake Champi, which is sort of flying in space. And then Lake Gurge, which is a misprint for Lake George, which is in quite the wrong place. York that's important because York, we now call Toronto, played an important role in the history of Canada. And so it's important that one distinguish between York, the city, and New York, the state. And then we have Kukukut. And so these are all the problems that the British colonies, which is not spelled correctly. Please mark more clearly the border of Canada on this map. Also fix names of lakes. So now we get yet another color scheme. They get a full title. Lake Ontario and Lake Ontario. We have two lakes, one of them on land. And Lake Erie that's Pennsylvania. New York is now called New Hampshire, but it's given this Lake Ontario appendage. And the eastern part of Nova Scotia seems to be to the west of any other part of Nova Scotia. The Atlantic is spelt correctly. Pennsylvania is spelt correctly, but it's in the wrong place. Fort Oswego is spelt correctly, but it's very much in the wrong place. But they really like Fort Oswego. They like to keep it there somehow. New York has become New Hampshire. And the title is incorrect. It's spelt more or less correctly, but now it's stating principal seats rather than the principal seat of war, which is quite different from principal seats. And the date is wrong, still wrong. Oswego it's become, but we can't quite see it, but at least it's in Lake New York or something. There are several New Hampshires here. British have become Pritish, or they become Prettypool. About now I start to lose my enthusiasm. It's getting boring. This is now I'm guessing, but this is what they mean by the title, that British Hamris is British. I don't know what Hamris, but I'm assuming it's Hampshire. All right, please add colors and a legend to distinguish different areas on the map according to their category, for example, land or water. Now we have St. Pratt of something, not named. We have no idea what those colors mean because they're using colors, the same color for Canada and for the British colonies. Sorry, British. And the Atlantic is now misspelled. Fort Oswego is correctly spelled. I don't think it's there though. And we can't read the legend because it's the important part is missing. It wouldn't help though, because the color scheme is so crazy. All right, please separate the title from the map proper and complete the legend. So they did. You see, it gets worse. It doesn't get better, however much you help it. And I can go on like this with 100 different maps. At the very end, it makes me really long lists of all the errors and says that in the next map, we will have corrected all these errors. And then the next map has new errors. All right, so all of the yellow stuff is Canada. Massachusetts is a British colony, and the British colonies are British colonies. Lake Ontario is just about, something. It's not clear what's going on with the color scheme on the left. And Fort Buffalo seems now to be Fort Ma in Henry. Now, there is a Fort Henry. It's on the other end of Lake Ontario. But I don't know what Fort Ma might be. And then Crown Point is certainly not the name of Lake Ontario. Pennsylvania is not a British colony, and you get the idea. They're just all messed up. Then ChatGPT 5 says, would you like me to prepare a short teaching note to accompany the map, explaining its historical context for students? And I say, no, I'm always very polite, but I don't feel polite at this point. Please extend the map to include the mentioned lakes and rivers using blue color as per your legend. So now the Lake Erie is called Lake Gamplin, which presumably means Lake Champlain, which is up the other end of New York. British colonies Pennsylvania is now called British colonies, and it's in the wrong place. Fort Oswego is in yet another place, and so on. At least the Atlantic Ocean seems to be in good shape. So this is a link where you can see the entire dialogue between me and it. And I have several of these links if anybody wants to study the Holy Roman Empire in 1032. I have 100 maps, all of them wrong, some of them ridiculously wrong. What's going on here? They're not doing anything wrong. They're just trying to do something which they are structurally incapable of doing because they can't handle pixels. This applies to any kind of image that you ask it to create, not just to maps. It's easy to illustrate with maps, but there was one which was created by, as a joke. Some Altman sweeping, scaling under the rug with 3 arms. That was the challenge. They produced a cartoon. I mean, ChatGPT produced a cartoon with 4 arms. That's because LLMs are not aware of anything. They cannot recognize text in pixels. And that's because they can't recognize anything. But they can't recognize text so that they can link the text as it appears on the map with the text as it appears on a list of British colonies, for instance. It has all the knowledge that it needs to have to get everything right on these maps in text form, in lists, and I mean books about the history of the French and Indian War. But it can't link the pixel patterns in the images with the text in the text, because that's not made of pixels. And that's why the maps are so bad, and why helping it with text is not really helping it, because it can't really make the bridge between word lake on my nudge in the direction of maybe you make all the lakes be marked in blue. They can't understand how to link that to the use of the pixel pattern, which we read as lake on the map. The map is just 2 pixel matrices, one encoding color, the other encoding brightness. From that, you get all the planes of color, but also all the lines of color, some of which are rivers, some of which are boundaries. Sometimes it makes a distinction between those 2, sometimes not. On one map, Canada is called boundary. How does generative AI work? You have a target domain. In this case, it would be the French and Indian Wars. And you have a subdomain for which you have training data. So in the ideal world, you'd have lots of maps, lots of data about deaths and so forth. And then you collect more and more training data so that you can recognize patterns in the target data. That's the goal. And Sam Altman's motto was always, if you just give us more data, we'll solve the problem. We'll make intelligent AI. And now he's realized that scaling is not enough. Lots of people knew that already from the beginning. Our book is all about that. And what you need, in addition to scaling, is representative training data. That means data which has the same statistical distribution as the target data. You can only recognize patterns using training data if the training data has the statistical distribution of the domain where you're wanting to find the patterns. This is the crucial thing. Given the way in which pixels are arranged, if you have a very simple pixel image, just 64 by 64 pixels, that's tiny. There are 256 raised to the power of 12,288 different combinations. Now, you can remove some of these combinations when you're dealing with maps, for instance. You can just say, only use these colors. You still end up with a combinatorial problem, which means that you can't have a distribution across that sort of data with that sort of density of possible differences, which would be analogous to the distribution that you can have among text. Text is relatively constrained. It's rather easy, well, it took a long time and a lot of money, but it's possible anyway to create training data which maps patterns in the target domain pretty accurately. But you can't do that with pixels, and that's why these attempts, I'm afraid, will always fail to this, neither through logic-based AI, neurosymbolic AI, nor through large language model-driven AI. The problems are just insolvable.
Any questions, either here or online? You can unmute yourself and ask questions. Any questions here?